It gives us great pleasure to commence this annual tradition by warmly welcoming you to the 2022 CHS Hall of Fame induction ceremony. We are so honored, humbled, and grateful to celebrate with you all Columbia High School's past, present, and future.
Today we have quite a special program planned for you, one that celebrates your predecessors and one that celebrates you as Columbia High School Cougars. Today is a day to sit back, relax, and listen to the stories of our four of the remarkable alumni who walked the halls of CHS before you. Today is a day to learn from their experiences. Today is a day to be inspired.
On our stage, we have Columbia High School Student President Lila Gold, and CHS Hall of Fame Committee members Bahati Zaboy, Michael McKee, and Bridget Hines. They are some of the student members who have worked tirelessly to make this day happen. Thank you.
Without further ado, we present to you Madam President Lila Gold and Hall of Fame member Stephen Alexander.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us today for the CHS 2022 Hall of Fame induction ceremony. My name is Lila Gold and I'm the president of the CHS Student Council. I'm also sporting the original Ultimate Frisbee team jacket from 1969. And before we start, I just also want to echo what Mr. McCormick just said and give our Hall of Fame committee, our students, and our staff a round of applause for all of their hard work this year.
My name is Stephen Alexander, and I am a member of the CHS Hall of Fame Committee. I'd like to invite those who are able and wish to stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated.
As we begin our program today, I would like to tell you a bit about the history of the CHS Hall of Fame. As many of you are aware, Columbia High School is a special place. Many CHS graduates have gone on and continue to go on to do great things in the world. From doctors, to lawyers, to activists, actors, athletes, artists, musicians, producers, designers, and the list goes on. In the mid-1980s, the CHS Hall of Fame Committee was established as part of the Student Council to recognize the vast accomplishments of its graduates. In 1985, the Hall of Fame inducted its first two alumni, Senior U.S. Circuit Judge Amalia Kurse and world-renowned actor Roy Scheider. Since then, every year, the committee has inducted anywhere from 1 to 4 former students who had demonstrated academic excellence during their time at CHS and have gone on to influence the world around them in positively meaningful ways. Before we honor this year's alumni, let's take one more look back.
Columbia High School, Maplewood, New Jersey, 07040. Dear students, society sees us how it wants to see us, in the simplest terms and in the most convenient definitions. We are seen as the brains, the athletes, the basket cases, the princesses, and the troublemakers. But that's not us. We're the journalists, the scientists,
in problem solving, one kind of problem doesn't mean you're good at solving another.
Of energy to keep a bee foraging. Even when working on flowers, flight bundles must be kept heated so that the bee can take off.
professional athletes. The Olympic medalists.
Runs by Toretta Park. Don't you forget about me.
The lawmakers.
Don't you.
The entertainers.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
You okay? Is everything all right?
Done all this for me unless you wanted to get back together, am I right?
What are you doing here?
What if I told you I could deliver Tommy's entire organization, and I can do it without starting a war?
The artists.
If people are looking at The Daily Show as the only source of news out there, then that's a sad commentary on news.
It's like, what do you want to be? Are you going to be a fashion stylist? Are you going to be an interior designer? Are you going to be an art collector? And I like to be everything.
The authors. The musicians.
And on the drums, the mighty Max Weinberg. Don't you forget about me. I'll be alone, dancing, you know it, baby. Going to take you apart. I put us back together.
We are the doctors, veterans, educators, activists.
Forget about me.
The disruptors.
Don't you.
We are aware and we are changing the world. Sincerely yours, Columbia High School.
We hope you enjoyed our Hall of Fame retrospective created by CHS 2017 alumni and former TV production student Ben Kruger. Today we'll be adding 4 more alumni to the list, honoring 2 posthumously, 1 virtually, and 1 in person. As our 2022 inductees, we know you'll enjoy hearing about their journey through CHS and the legacies that they have created. And we hope that their stories will inspire you to one day become a part of this wonderful tradition with your own plaque in our Hall of Fame committee, in our Hall of Fame.
We would now like to invite to the microphone CHS teacher, Miss Kate Brown, who will say a few words about author Judith Warner, who had the privilege of working closely with our final inductee to be honored today, Grace Mirabella, class of 1946. Have a great day.
Hello. Our first inductee, I'm so sorry. Okay, here we go. Our first inductee was a forward-thinking woman by the name of Grace Mirabella. She was a graduate from the class of 1946. Just to give you a little context, when Miss Mirabella started high school, Franklin D. Roosevelt was president. And by the time she graduated, Harry S. Truman was president, and the United States and World War II had just ended months earlier. After Columbia High School, she went on to attend college at Skidmore in Saratoga, New York, where she said she had a great time. Sadly, we lost her this past December at the age of 92. And had she been here with us, we could be singing happy birthday as she would have been turning 93 in 2 days. Grace Mirabella had an impressive career in the world of fashion, where she worked hard, starting out at Macy's, and before that, she enjoyed shopping at a clothing store in Short Hills called Fellers. She was never interested in the spotlight. Her main goal was to make clothing accessible for every woman, not just runway models. As we'll hear in our pre-recorded speech from Judith Warner, Miss Mirabella was the first editor to ever put a black model on the cover of a magazine. This was groundbreaking for its time. This supermodel's name is Beverly Johnson, whom she credits to this day as Grace Mirabella being the reason she had a career and helped open up the door for so many other models behind her. Grace Mirabella was also the first person to ever have tobacco ads removed from magazines, which was a very powerful move to take on the tobacco industry. Grace self-described her everyday look as casual and American. Jeans, camel's hair jacket, penny loafers with stitching coming out of the seams. Her parents were hardworking from Italy. Her mother worked at an upscale dress shop in East Orange. One day during lunch, as all mothers do from time to time, she let Grace have it by asking, "Do you plan to go around all the time looking like that? If you want to have a career in fashion, Grace, you'd better learn how to dress." Fast forward a few years later, Miss Mirabella found herself promoted to the editor-in-chief of Vogue magazine, bringing in the likes of designers such as Halston, Yves Saint Laurent, Jeffrey Bean, and Ralph Lauren. During her time at Vogue, 1971 to 88, she took the magazine from a circulation falling towards 400,000 in 1971 to rising above 1.5 million in 1988. Miss Mirabella went on to found Mirabella, which was a very popular fashion magazine in the 90s. She also wrote a book called In and Out of Vogue. In and Out of Vogue was co-authored by Judith Warner, who was kind enough to record a speech for today's induction ceremony. She spent a lot of time with Grace and shared some funny stories about their time together. Judith Warner was sad to hear of her passing and wishes they had kept in touch more often over the years. For Judith Warner to take time out for us today, it is a very kind gesture. As modest as she is, it isn't lost on us how busy she is. Judith Warner co-authored Hillary Clinton's best-selling autobiography, has appearances on NPR, and is best known for her best-selling and award-winning books and articles on mental health and American society. But in 1984, she was Grace Mirabella's ghostwriter. Twice a week for about 9 months, they met in the dining room of the elegant townhouse Grace shared with her husband, Bill Kahan, and Grace talked Judy through the story of her life. They were more than 30 years apart in age and every bit as distant in status and experience, but soon enough, Grace was calling Judy kiddo, her sign of approval, and Judy felt like family. Without further ado, please direct your attention to the screen for Judith Warner's speech for Miss Grace Mirabella.
Speaking of high school, can you tell us a little bit about your educational background?
I went to high school in New Jersey, Maplewood, New Jersey. It was a very nice high school. We think that Mirabella is smart,
Beautiful.
Today. Alive. Upscale.
brave.
There's just a certain style. There's a classic quality that the Mirabella woman has.
The thing that makes it the appropriate fashion magazine for a contemporary reader is this balancing act between text and style.
Thank you so much for giving me the chance to share some memories of Grace Mirabella. Grace always used to say that she was a picture person. You do the words, she would say. So maybe it makes sense that when I tried to come up with the right words to capture her, it was instead a really strong picture that formed in my mind. It's from the first meeting I ever had alone with her. We were having lunch at J.G. Mellon, a bar and restaurant on the Upper East Side. She'd ordered a hamburger, which was a big surprise for me, because I figured she'd have a salad because, well, Vogue. And then she'd done something that I'd never seen anyone do with a hamburger before. She cut it in half, and she ate it like a sandwich. I wish I could tell you what we talked about. I have no memory of that. I don't remember what she wore, although I'm sure it was beige because she always wore beige. But after 30 plus years, I do have a crystal clear memory of her cutting that hamburger. It was such an elegant gesture and such a smart thing to do if you were at a business lunch and you were wearing beige, because you could eat what you wanted without having to worry about it. And the person with you would focus not on what was maybe falling out of your mouth, but on what you had to say. You could be comfortable and confident and, well, attractive all at the same time. And that's what she was all about. Being a normal person, doing normal people things, but looking better than normal while doing so. And showing by example how the rest of us might move through life looking and feeling a little better too. That combination of enjoyment and confidence and comfort was what Grace meant when she talked about style. She loved the word style. She didn't like fashion per se. In fact, fashiony was one of her insults. It meant silly and trendy, not likable or useful. Those who got her wrong called her practical, which was a big insult in the fashion world, almost as bad as being middle class, which they also said about her, and which was true, or, also true, being from New Jersey. For all that to make sense, you have to understand both what Vogue was and what New Jersey meant, back when Grace first joined the one and left the other. When Grace started working at Vogue in the early 1950s, the magazine staff was full of debutantes and trust fund babies, full of girls. Until they were married, they were pretty much always called girls, who called their salaries pin money and talked about daddy paying to send them to Vogue, like he might have paid for sending them to finishing school. These were girls who weren't from New Jersey. They certainly weren't from Newark, New Jersey, where Grace started out in a working-class Italian immigrant extended family who lived multiple households together in a single-family house with Grace's grandfather living in a cold water shack out back. The Vogue girls weren't even from Maplewood, which was already an upper-middle-class community when Grace moved there for junior high and high school. This was during the 1940s, the World War II years. At Columbia High School, Grace played a lot of tennis and spent a lot of time hanging out at the local ice cream shop with her best friend. She dated boys in uniform from the local army base, and, here's a real blast from the past, she took home economics, which she failed dismally, she told me, although she had, for a brief point in time, known how to make a very nice cream sauce. Grace was the subject of a lot of newspaper and magazine profiles, first in 1971, when she became the unlikely editor-in-chief of Vogue, and then in 1988 and 1989, when she was unceremoniously dumped by Vogue and started a new women's magazine in her own name. She told me that even if she talked about having been born in Newark during interviews, profiles of her only talked about Maplewood. Newark was just too unimaginable, maybe too unacceptable. I think she enjoyed the gasps that she got from society types when they learned about the state of her birth. Up to a point, at least. I think it rankled a bit, too. In fact, I'm sure that it did. And that's no doubt why, once she took over at Vogue, she was all about change. American society was changing a whole lot in the early 1970s, and while plenty of people her age weren't happy about those changes, she was ready and waiting. And under her leadership, Vogue ran with it. Grace put the first black model on the cover of the magazine. She ran photo spreads that were, in today's words, sex positive. She beefed up Vogue's coverage of culture and science and health. She became an anti-smoking crusader, taking on big tobacco, even though it meant a big hit in ad revenue. Vogue had always sold dreams, but now the dreams were of doing as well as being. And she tripled the magazine's circulation in the process. But she never talked about any of this in terms of her own vision or her own accomplishments. That really wasn't her thing. The way she told it, it was always about women, other women, modern women. Women who could do well, do good, and look great all at the same time, no matter where or what kinds of families they came from. And that's the thing, beyond the hamburger, that really stayed with me about her over the years. In a world where people worshipped looks and status, and increasingly over the decades money, Grace was all about talent. If she felt you had it, she had time for you. If you were faking it, or even if you just weren't living up to what she felt you could do or what her readers deserved, well, she said what she thought, and she meant what she said. Some people didn't like that, but those of us who did really loved her. I miss her. I miss what she did in the world and the sort of example that she set. And I wish she had been able to come here and talk to you today, because she was funny and she was sharp and she was truly unlike any person you're ever likely to meet, in or out of the world of Vogue. Thank you so much again.
To me, Mirabella is style and elegance.
On behalf of the Columbia High School Hall of Fame Committee, we would like to present Miss Grace Mirabella's plaque to CHS Principal Mr. Sanchez.
I just want to say I want to thank our Superintendent, Board of Education members, community members who are here, as well as your families, because as part of the referendum, we'll be creating our new media center that will have the archives open. And the archives, you will be able to peruse some of the historic alumnus who came from this very building, and we'll make sure that this plaque is presented nicely. So thank you very much.
Invite to the microphone CHS alumni and production designer and 2003 Hall of Fame inductee, Miss Jane Muskie, who will introduce our other three inductees, Bernard Buzzy Hellring Jr., Jonathan H. Jonny Hines, and Joel Silver of the class of 1970.
Hi, everyone. Here we go. My name's Jane Muskie, and I was in the class of 1972. A lot happens in this building year to year, decade to decade, and CHS is always and will always be a wonderful sanctuary for creativity, camaraderie, and let's face it, you guys get to explore anything you want to, and you've got the whole school behind you. We're all very lucky to go to this place and have been here. And I want to thank Kate McMorrow-Brown and the school for administration for their work assembling this event. And I want to just talk to you a little bit about Ultimate Frisbee. I first have to congratulate the CHS girls varsity team, who won the state championships not that long ago, a week ago, I think. So we're here to celebrate Buzzy, Jonny, and Joel today. They invented this sport, and it was sort of under the radar. And there were all these corners of school back then. We had a lot going on, as you guys do also. And what happened was every Monday, there was this buzz around the hall. And everyone would say, did you see it? Did you go to the game? What were they wearing, those heart soul shoes? It just went on and on about some game that was being played in the parking lot under lights at midnight or something. And everyone, I would say 99% of the school had no idea what was going on. But it just kept catching on, and people just kept showing up to the games, talking about it, and it became a sport. It became a bona fide sport with rules and regulations, and Jonny will talk about the history of it. And these three guys, they were always movers and shakers back then, but this was the epitome of what you could do just to get the school together to support something, and look where it is now. So I thank you all for being here, and I'm happy to be here with my friend and talk to all of you, and have a nice time hearing about the history of the sport. Thanks, everyone.
We would like to now share with you clips from an archived interview with Joel Silver, where he discusses the origins of Ultimate Frisbee.
But it was a enough of a game that made, sense to me, that I felt that there was a real chance of something fun to do here. And I brought it back to our high school, that would have been in the fall of 1968, around 50 years ago now. And we started playing the game. Early on, when I was in student council one day, this all happened, and I raised my hand and I said, I move that we create a committee to investigate bringing Frisbee into the curriculum. Everybody laughed, but that was approved. They voted.
Were you serious?
I didn't. I was doing it for the laugh. I didn't think I'd get a committee. So everybody voted and they said approve. So I now had this silly committee to look at bringing Frisbee into the curriculum, and the only way I could do kind of that officially was work on this game. So we had kind of an official reason, a quasi-official reason to begin to just make this game try to be something. And in that whole first year, which was my junior year, my son is a junior now at Harvard Westlake in LA, and I always tell him that was the same year that I was doing this. We were playing this game, which wasn't called Ultimate yet. We didn't have that idea to call it Ultimate. We were playing this game. At the end of that year, which would have been the spring of 1969, we did have a game played between the student council, because that was where the committee was, and the high school newspaper, the Columbian, which we were all part of as well. And that I somehow got an article into the Newark Evening News about that, which I think I wrote, that story. Did I have a byline? So it was in the Newark Evening News about that game between the student council and the high school newspaper. And I think, if I remember, the student council won that game, I think. But that was, and by the way, it was a serious game. We all were playing the game seriously, but it was a co-ed game, and it was meant to be a serious attempt at the game, but it was still kind of a joke. And not until the next year, when I was a senior, which is, was I guess 69, 70, we said we need to kind of let people know what this game is, how to play this game. And Buzzy did sit down, which you saw a piece of what he wrote. He did write the game, the rules up, and he did call it Speed Frisbee, which was, I guess, as the idea of an alternate to Guts Frisbee. This is a running game as opposed to a standing and being So he wrote it up, and I remember looking at it and saying, you know, that's not a good name, Speed Frisbee. It's not cool. It's not fun. I said, this is the ultimate game. Let's call it Ultimate Frisbee. It's very simple. And then we gave that typed up thing because we were schmoes. We were not athletes at all. And Jonny was the only kind of athletically inclined fellow, and he was the sports editor of the newspaper. I said, please review these rules and see if this makes sense. So that picture that you had up there was Jonny's notes on the rules of what exactly made this game in a more formal kind of a sports athletic fashion. The game, which we can delve into, you know, a little bit how it all happened at the school. But when we left the school the next year, which was Irv and Larry and all those guys, they were the Jonny Appleseeds. We took it to college, but they really had a concentrated effort. They built the game into what it is today. It's because of them. It's because of that group, that team, the fervor of those guys, of what Larry and Irv and those guys did, that there is, I think, this sport. Yes, we can say we helped found it, we helped develop it, but they're the ones that built it into what it is today. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
We would like to now invite to the microphone CHS Class of 1970 graduate and 2022 Hall of Fame inductee, Mr. Jonathan H. Jonny Hines.
Will we have a picture of the rules up here, or no? Anyway, it is really, really wonderful to be here. I have not been back since I graduated 52 years ago, and it's really amazing for me. It's a great honor, and it is great fun. And I thank everyone involved, the committee members, Principal Sanchez, Kate Brown, who was my liaison and the godmother of this, as far as I'm concerned, and Kate for that very nice introduction. I am not going to give some brilliant lecture, mini lecture, or even try to do that. I'm going to pause here again to see if we can have 3 or 4 cheers for the girls' ultimate champions and the boys' team, which came in second among 16. That's pretty damn good. Let's hear it. And really, as Joel said in that video, which was taken 4 years ago at the 50th anniversary in San Diego, really, the 3 of us, officially we made up the rules and spread them, but there were lots of us there in the class of 70, 71, 72, who were key to playing and helping develop the rules. 4 of them are in the front row here, brothers Chaz and Dave Lewant, Marty Berman, Fred Applegate, and very good contributors. And I am in the company, I see, having looked at the list of former inductees, of some really great people, in addition to Jane, who was there. And by the way, I had a huge crush on Jane, but I was too shy and embarrassed to do anything about it. Here we are together. I mean, when I look at the list, Lauryn Hill, amazing, one of my favorites, and Alfred Kinsey, class of 1912, if I'm not mistaken, who wrote the rules of sex. And we were in the rules of Ultimate Frisbee. If any of you don't know about him, Google him. Quite an interesting fellow he was. Apparently there was no sex in 1912, and he wrote the rules. Now this, also I'm reminded that a couple of years ago at Princeton, where I went to college, I was honored among a list of illustrious alumni for my role in founding Ultimate Frisbee, God knows nothing else. And among the others on the list were John D. Rockefeller Jr. and Donald Rumsfeld, ex-Secretary of Defense, who got us into the disastrous war in Iraq. And Albert Coors of the Coors beer, who said to have invented the aluminum can to put beer in. Now, that's something. Here are some tidbits. I said I wouldn't offer any grand talk, but here are some tidbits to think about. Does anyone know where the name Frisbee came from? Who knows? Who'll say it? It came from a company. Marty, could you come up here for a second? It came from a pie company in New Haven, Connecticut. Mr. Frisbee had a company called the Frisbee Pie Company. And back in those days, in the 1940s, pass it around so people can see, but really, I need it back. It's one of a kind. They didn't have thin aluminum pie tins. They had this thick metal pie tin. And at lunch hour, they were said to have started to throw it around. And that's where the name Frisbee came from. You'll see the name Frisbee Pie Company on the tin, which is pretty amazing. Well, where it came from, I guess no one has said it, people who don't know. Joel had gone to a summer camp up in Massachusetts. They were playing a kind of a primitive form of what the rudiments of what we developed into Ultimate. He brought it back after the summer, and we started to play around with it, and Joel told you what happened. We wrote the rules, and I don't know if there's a picture here, but Buzzy wrote them, as Joel said, and put them on a mimeograph machine, which is what we had then with purple mimeograph ink. And then Joel gave it to me, Joel and Buzzy gave it to me, because I was the sort of, half athlete of the group, and asked me to comment. And I wrote hand notes on the rules. And that, if you see the picture, I mean, among other things, it was said in the first rules that, well, 7 on a team is the standard, but you can play with up to 20 or 30 on the team. And one of my comments was, you've got to be kidding. No way. You can't play a game with 20 or 30 people on each side of the team. And all sorts of other things I wrote. What we tried to do was to combine the best of various sports, of soccer, of American football, of basketball, of hockey, and that's sort of what we did. We used to play, as some of you know, in the parking lot down by the railroad tracks, asphalt, and we used to play every weekend night. And my parents thought I was crazy. They said, "What about girls? Are you going to marry a Frisbee?" And we played all winter. The Frisbees, if you knock it down, very brittle, they would crack like an old LP record. We got in contact with the Whammo company and told them what we were doing, showed them the rules. They agreed to supply us endless supply boxes of Frisbees so that we could keep playing and breaking them all winter. We went off to college, class of 70, while those who came after us, as Joel very rightly said, developed it, started playing between high schools in the area. We brought it to our colleges. I brought it to Princeton, and Irv Cal brought it to Rutgers. We organized the first intercollegiate Ultimate Frisbee game in 1972, or 71, 72 I guess. It was held 102 years to the day after the first intercollegiate football game, which was also Princeton-Rutgers. So it was a pretty amazing event. Rutgers won. They accused us of having a bunch of football jocks who were roughing them up on the team. There's no one here from Rutgers to contradict me when I say that's not so. We played fair and square. They beat us, but we won the rematch, the first indoor Frisbee game at Jadwin Gym at Princeton a year later. Now, Now it's played all over the world. I don't know in how many countries, but it is an incredible sport. And I can report, as some of you may know, that Ultimate Frisbee is in contention to be an Olympic sport. It's not clear that this is going to happen. The process is as follows. Each city that hosts an Olympics has the right to choose what they call up to 4, I think, demonstration sports. And we are now, the Frisbee organization, I personally am not very active in it, but I've been briefed about it. The Frisbee organization has been lobbying the LA Olympics Committee. They're doing 2028. They were supposed to do 2024, but now are doing 2028. The process is ongoing right now, and we may learn within a few months whether we are on the short list, and then there's a process after that. Interestingly, two of the major, let's say, competitors to be a demonstration sport are lacrosse and American football. One advantage we have, Ultimate, is that it is a universal sport played everywhere. Not just in the US, also it's a great California sport. One disadvantage we have is we don't have the TV coverage, the hundreds and thousands and millions of spectators. But in any event, I'll leave that for now. Enough about the Frisbee history. Let me say a few words about the three of us, Buzzy and Joel and I together. We were together on the school newspaper, The Columbian. Buzzy was editor-in-chief. I was sports editor. Joel was also active. I forget the post that he had. We had very different personalities, but we hung around together. We got to be best friends. Lots of sleepovers, all kinds of things like that. Joel's parents were fast-talking promoter types, showbiz types, super lively, and Joel turned out that way. Buzzy's parents, I remember from spending a lot of time with them at sleepovers, etc., just hanging around the house, were highly intelligent, low-key. Buzzy's dad was a lawyer, and I remember distinctly during the sleepovers that he would be on the phone talking to clients to all hours of night, far after we barricaded in his office or the bedroom office and talking. And I was intrigued by this, and I think that was part of my evolving toward the law. Now my sons, now that I'm on the phone at all hours, they took the opposite view and they said, no way, we're going to become a lawyer, we want a life. My dad had a successful business without a real higher education. He was educated as a shop teacher, a magician with his hands. I was not. I remember my project to build a birdhouse at South Orange Junior High, as it was called then, was a great failure. My dad was disappointed. The teacher was disappointed. I got a terrible grade. Buzzy and Joel and I used to play Risk all the time. I don't know if people are still playing that game. We were just playing that all the time when we weren't writing Frisbee rules and playing Frisbee. Now, last thing I wanted to talk about, a couple of tidbits, just some sound bites from my life for what it's worth. When Kate asked me to write a biography, I felt like I was writing my obituary, but I'm still here very much and energetic and hope to be for a while. I think the key word about my life is kind of accidents. Not in the sense of tragic accidents, just accidents of life, one thing leading to another. When I was a little kid at South Mountain School, who here is from South Mountain School? Let's hear it. I used to read books about World War II all the time. I was just engrossed in World War II. Books about World War II, TV about World War II, movies about World War II. And my teachers would tell my parents at the conferences, you know, Johnny's a great student, but what's with him? What is wrong with him? Why does he only read about World War II? That led to an interest in the Cold War, which was going on between Russia and America, and sadly we seem to have another one. Hopefully it won't get hot now, but at that time there was a threat of a hot war, and some families were building bomb shelters You could see little periscopes on their front lawn. Maybe some of them are still there. And one of my great friends in Maplewood, Gil Levine, his parents had a bomb shelter. And they said that each son, they had 3 sons, each one could invite, in the event of a nuclear war, each one could invite one friend into the bomb shelter. And so Gil and his 2 brothers, they kept lists of their friends, and you went up and down that list, and if you were best friend in case of nuclear war, you could go into the bomb shelter with them. It never happened, and hopefully it never will. At CHS, I took a course in Russian history because I was already interested. That spurred me further. I took all kinds of advanced placement courses, including calculus. I can't even tell you what calculus is today, no less do anything with it. But I guess it helped me go on and get into a good college, and it also maybe helped me in my legal business career doing very big international deals worth billions of dollars. Maybe there's a connection, I don't know. I went, because my parents didn't have any real education, I didn't know what to do. I assumed I would go into my father's business, so I applied early decision to Wharton School at Penn undergraduate, but you didn't have to take any business courses. And when the course list came for the second year, it said accounting and finance and marketing, and I said, that's not me. And Buzzy, one of my best friends, was at Princeton. I used to go visit him. I fell in love with the place. They had a very strong Russian studies, international affairs. I went there. My teacher said and I studied Russian language among others, and my teacher said, if you really want to learn, you better go to Russia. It's the only way to learn the language. I did. I met there my future wife, and I invited her out to dinner. She was a junior graduate student, and she answered me by saying, Mr. Hines, my office hours are Thursdays from 3 to 4. If you wish to contact me, you may come there. And being still shy and embarrassed, I did. I kept at it, and she's my wife now. I got into, well, after college, I didn't know what to do. As many people, I didn't really know what direction to go. I knew I liked liberal arts, social sciences, and so I did end up going to law school down at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, a wonderful place. And I started my career as an international lawyer, first in New York City and then in Moscow for the last 20 years. Russia, I've always said, is never boring, and especially now. But God knows the horrors that Russia is wreaking on Ukraine now are just unspeakable. I've had my share of adventure, including in connection with this, including when I was flying out of Russia right after that invasion started. I was on a flight Moscow, New York, and when we got over Greenland, the pilot announced that Canada had just closed its skies to Russian aircraft, so we had to go back to Moscow, which we did, and I got out a few days later. So that is really what I wanted to say. Again, I thank everyone for having me here. It's a great honor of being inducted into this wonderful Hall of Fame, and thank you very much.
Thank you. We'd now like to welcome to the stage Ms. Heidi Hellring, Buzzy Hellring's sister.
Wow, it's great. Thank you. I'm also an alumni, class of 77. And on behalf of my brother, our family, and friends, and all of those who knew Buzzy, thank you so much for this great honor. I know he would have been very proud because he really had great experience here at Columbia. And there were so many reasons, great teachers, but of course I remember his good friendships. Jonny, Marty Berman, Fred Applegate, Chaz Levant, Dave Levant, and so many others. I look at that picture that you see over there, and I remember every one of them. This is very emotional for me. Buzzy's name has, been carried all over the world from what he did here at Columbia. And it's been just a privilege for me to watch the growth of Ultimate Frisbee. You know, the vast majority of the alumni, the honorees who have been inducted into the Hall of Fame, the CHS Hall of Fame, were chosen for what they did after they graduated from Columbia. This selection is highly unusual, as far as I know the list, because these students were chosen for what they did while they were at school here. Here, inspiring, eh? I believe that when Buzzy and his friends started playing and creating the game, they knew they had great concept. They seized the opportunity and sought to spread the game's joy and cooperative lessons. Buzzy was devoted to his work on the Columbian newspaper, the school newspaper, the Columbian. He lived and breathed writing articles, expanding the publication, making it important. And if you go back to the newspapers from that era, it's filled with activist things and rallies and all kinds of events that were happening in the late 60s. It's really eye-opening to see what was going on in school at that time. It was very different just a few years later when I was here. And he learned from the Columbian the power of the press. So he and his friends, wanting to share this game and develop it, knowing they had to, took the game rules, printed, published, and distributed them. Not in the newspaper, but in a pamphlet that is really funny to see. And then every few years that was updated later. The rocket-like spread of Ultimate was astounding, really phenomenal. It just spread so quickly. And today, by extension, CHS is also recognizing the numerous other students who played here and then taught the sport in their colleges and communities around the country. And as Jonny said, today, the sport is played all over the world. And I read in over 120 countries. It is an official World Games sport, which is the next step below the Olympics. And as he said, it's on track to be an Olympic sport one day. It's really touching. In the late 60s, playing a game with a Frisbee, a toy, really at that time, was a somewhat counterculture, anti-establishment activity. There was this game in California that Joel mentioned, Guts, which was really, you threw it as hard as you can at the other team and tried to knock them over. I mean, it was not a together-like sport, but what turned out to be Ultimate has real life lessons. And part of that reason is, I think, metaphorically, there's something very freeing about the very flight of the disc. It's beautiful if you watch it. When you launch a Frisbee, you're sending it into free flight. It almost has a life of its own. When you catch it, it's like you receive a dose of freedom. You play with others, you learn to share that privilege of freedom. Unique to Ultimate is a rule called Spirit of the Game, SOTG. It requires players to cooperate and respect one another. Ultimate, the game of Ultimate teaches us how to live together in a free society. By way of example of the amazingness, I don't know, by way of example of how amazing this sport is, there's a camp in the Middle East called Ultimate Peace. They're always looking for counselors, by the way. They bring teenagers, it's a non-profit organization, they bring teenagers from Israel and Palestine together to live. They live there at the camp, and they play Frisbee. They learn the sport, and they're taught to work out their conflicts on the field. And of course, the hope is that they carry these lessons from the field to life beyond camp. And remember, that all started right here. Maplewood and Columbia High School are famous and known the world over because of Ultimate. This is the birthplace of Ultimate. And I hope current and future CHS students continue to seize opportunities to spread joy and peace throughout the world. Thank you.
On behalf of Columbia High School Hall of Fame Committee, we would like to present the plaques to Mr. Jonathan H. Jonny Hines, who will be accepting all three inductees plaques. This is Mr. Schultz.
We hope you've enjoyed today's annual Hall of Fame induction ceremony and that it leads you to reflect, to strive for more, and to leave this program inspired.
Thank you to all who made this happen, CHS Hall of Fame student and teacher committee members, Mr. Campiglia and CCN, Ms. Kamina and stage crew, Mr. Bauer and the jazz band, CHS alumni, Ben Kruger, IT staff, custodial staff, Somea President Ms. Lopez, CHS administrators, Ms. Singer, Mr. Mullen, Mr. Sanchez, and our Hall of Fame inductees, past and present. Thank you so much.